Welcome to the second video in the series. In this video, I want to discuss the churches because there's again misinformation out there, and when I wanted to find out the truth, I want to know about Jesus and all that, I had to figure it out. I met with different people, different churches, and anyway, so. uh, The main context. If you go after Jesus died, resurrected 3 days, that'll get into that another time. But um, understand this: the apostles scattered. Peter and everybody scattered except John. John was with his mother, Jesus' mother Mary, and was there at the cross. He did not scatter. He may have scattered in the garden, but he ended up coming back by way of his mother to the cross. Anyway, so then Jesus resurrected, and then but the apostles were still scared. They were very scared, and it wasn't until Jesus appeared to them, and then 40 days after the resurrection, I believe, was what they call Pentecost. Pentecost was the beginning of the church, where the Holy Spirit came down and gave the apostles, who were full of fear, gave them courage, and so much so that all the apostles died by being murdered, except John. So you went from being scattered in a fear to all of a sudden you have these people with confidence, and they didn't care if they get killed or not. And so Pentecost was the beginning of the church. Then you had Peter. Peter was the one who held the keys, so to speak. In other words, the leader, etc. There's misinterpretations of that, but basically Peter is buried in Rome, as well as St. Paul. And so Peter was the first pope, and you had subsequent popes after that. So let's take a look at the churches right now. Like I said before, you had the beginning, which is the Catholic Church. You started with the succession of popes, and if you want to check them out, you can go Wikipedia. They do a decent job. And by the way, none of these numbers may be perfect, and the origins may not be perfect, but it's good enough. So the Catholic Church, again, the succession of popes, and first pope was Peter. Peter means rock, basically. And the churches were already well established. You understand, back then they had no Bible. The Bible wasn't put together later on, and many people could not read anyway. So basically people would gather, and in the beginning they were underground. There was persecution, and there was martyrdom, but eventually, certain Roman leaders allowed the Christians to be free. Back that time was the Roman Empire. Okay. So the Roman Empire covered, all the way down to the Middle East, right, and throughout Europe, right around the Mediterranean Sea. So it was the Roman Empire. So it wasn't until a benevolent Roman leader allowed Christianity to thrive and grow without persecution. And so you had the churches, and the churches throughout the Roman Empire. And and again, if you want to take a look at the church, some of the old churches, you can look on Wikipedia. Again, there's a good source. You can find all these old churches that were already around before the Great Schism and before the Bible was even written. They had these churches. So again, the East and West were already established. Eastern refers to like the Middle East into Egypt. Western refers to more like Europe, if you want to do it that way. Then around, again, 1,000 years later, about 1,000 years, again, the United States is what, 1775 on to, so 200 plus years, that's it. But this is 1,000 years, the church was already established. Then you had the Great Schism. Again, you can look it up, other sources. Basically, the Eastern, what they call the Orthodox Church, split from the Catholic Church, and basically they denied the papal authority. So I should backtrack. The apostles went to different places. Peter went certain areas. Of course, Andrew and they went to certain areas. I'm not going to get into it, but they all went throughout Asia, Middle East, and into Europe, and in Africa. So they went and spread the good news, right? And basically that's how the churches started. This is a key point, and a lot of people miss this. The printing press was not around till 1440, and it wasn't invented. And then after that, I believe the first book that was published was the Bible. But that's important key because, again, even if they did have the Bible, many people couldn't read. So let's do the Bible. Basically, it was assembled by St. Jerome in the Latin Vulgate. It was basically consisted of first the New Testament was done in Reims in around 1582, and then the Old Testament was 1610 Douay in France. King James version was done about 1611. Again, the dates are a little loose, and it's missing certain texts and books that were formed together by Jerome and Latin Vulgate. So, and this is key because once the Bible started to be printed, then you get people all over the place starting to interpret the way they want. 1517, Martin Luther, he basically was, I believe, a Catholic priest and or monk, and he was protesting the selling of indulgences, and he believed faith alone was all you needed, not works. And that's a very loose interpretation. But anyway, the bottom line is that he rejected the church, and he started to, form his own church in a sense. In the 1520s, you also had another situation going on with Zwingli in Switzerland, and then basically it's a Swiss Reformed church. About 1529, the Lutheran Church started to develop, which obviously is founded by Martin Luther. He's from Germany. And then 1534, the Church of England. Now, Henry VIII wanted a divorce. He was on his, I think he was married, maybe his second wife, I forget. And then he wanted a divorce. And that's a very famous story. I don't need to, don't go into it further. But the bottom line is he said, okay, well, the heck with you, Rome, I'm going to form my own church. So he formed the Church of England. It's also called the Anglican Church, and in the United States it's called the Episcopal Church. So it was founded by King Henry VIII, and so he could have control over what he was, so he could marry who he wanted to marry, right? Or whatever you want to go. So, and in 1550 you get Reformed, or Calvinism, was named by Lutherans who opposed it. So John Calvin was the founder of Calvinism. But the Lutherans were the ones who were calling Calvinism, named after him, because they opposed it. So you have at the beginning of churches opposing churches already within the Protestant churches. So, and John Calvin was France, and then he moved. He took the ideas and went into Switzerland, and then this is kind of, I may be a little off on this, but the mid 1700s. The Methodists came from this situation. They took some of the Calvinist philosophy, and John Wesley, who's the founder, developed the Methodist Church. In 1527, you have the Anabaptists. So they have the Amish, you have the Hutterites, and the Mennonites. The Amish and Mennonites are still around. I don't know about the Hutterites. The founder was Aman. So Amish Aman was the founder. Hutterites, the founder was Hooter, and then Mennonites, the founder was Menno Simmons, and or Simons, and so these were founded around 1527, and they're called Anabaptists. The next would be the Unitarians. They were founded 1579 by Faustus Socinus in Poland. So you can start to see what's happening throughout Europe. They're shirking off maybe the rules and regulations, etc., and the church itself. They're rejecting the Catholic Church to find their own church. And so next one would be Baptist Church, was founded by John Smith. And then 1707, Presbyterianism, basically is a version of Reformed Calvinist Protestants, comes from Scotland, I believe. And then in the United States, you have 1829. Now, again, the United States was formed, basically 1775, right? So you have the 1829 30th, you have the Church of Christ and Latter-day Saints. That founder was Joseph Smith. He's from New York. This eventually became Mormonism. Mormonism is a tricky thing because after Smith, they started migrating to the West, and then they were rejected by many areas, and so they wanted to find out their own area, not be, at war with people, so to speak. So they went to Utah, and Brigham Young about 1847. So then now you have that church. You have the Millerites, founded by Miller in New York, and that ended up becoming, or a denomination of that was the Seventh-day Adventists. So that was 1863. The founder was Ellen and James White, husband and wife, and then Joseph Bates. So it was about 1863. Assemblies of God was about 1914, founded in Arkansas by an assembly, basically. And there's on and on and on. There's the evangelical Protestants, the evangelicals, there's non-denominational evangelicals. The born-again evangelicals, there's the non-denominational, Campus Crusaders, Charismatics, etc., etc., etc. Keeps going on. You have all these little churches everywhere. That's basically it about the churches, where they came from. This is where I think the rubber meets the road in this whole talk. And that the original Catholic Church had its issues. It was not without problems. It was not without controversy and sometimes evil. And for example, Martin Luther was complaining about it. He was protesting it. And there are abuses. I mean, in the church, look at the different churches and all the pedophilia, right? It's disgusting. It's gross. But what I'm trying to say is the church still exists. On these other churches, the Protestant churches also exist, and they have their own issues. So that's the historical perspective on the churches, kind of where they came from. And I hope you enjoyed this